This week, we're dealing with some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
The tragic death of Liam Payne.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have probably heard the news by now. But what we're really here to unpack is the whirlwind of conspiracy theories that followed.
Right.
Specifically the ones tying Payne's death to rapper Sean Diddy Combs.
Yeah, it's certainly been a tough time for fans, and I think whenever a tragedy like this hits, it's almost human nature to search for explanations.
Yeah.
Even if they veer into the, let's say creative side.
Absolutely. So before we get to the theories themselves, let's lay down the factual groundwork just so we're all on the same page.
Okay.
Liam Payne was in Buenos Aires for a Neil Horan concert. Tragically, on October 16th, he died after falling from his hotel balcony.
Police were called to the hotel because of a disturbance, and the preliminary autopsy report cited craniocerebral injuries as the cause of death.
Okay.
Just to clarify for our listeners, that essentially means severe injuries to the head and brain.
Good point. Now, it's important to note that the police investigation is still ongoing, but early reports indicate that Payne's hotel room was found in what they called disarray, with prescription medications and alcohol present.
And you can imagine that detail in particular has become a breeding ground for speculation online.
Okay, buckle up, because this is where things get really interesting. Alongside the official investigation, this whole other narrative started bubbling up online almost immediately.
And that's the thing about the internet. It gives everyone a platform,
Right.
which can be powerful, but it also means that rumors and theories can spread like wildfire, often with little to no basis in reality.
Exactly. So let's talk about the biggest theory out there, the Diddy Connection.
Okay.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Liam Payne and Diddy.
Right.
But bear with me here. This theory hinges on a resurfaced video from 2017 where Liam describes this, well, let's just say, interesting encounter he had with Diddy and Jay-Z.
And this encounter seems to have become a focal point for fans who are trying to make sense of Payne's sudden death.
Yeah, and I have to admit, even I was a little thrown by Liam's description of the encounter even back then. In the video, he talks about Diddy's, and I quote, evil laugh. He even jokes about being a little bit fearful of Diddy. And then there was this super awkward long handshake.
Yeah. It's understandable that fans might latch on to these details, especially given the timing of Diddy's current legal troubles.
Right.
He's facing some extremely serious charges, and I think that context can't be ignored. It adds a layer of, let's call it, intrigue to the whole situation.
Totally. And you can see how people would connect those dots. We saw comments popping up online like, Liam Payne talks about Diddy. Everyone tries to stop him. And now he dies mysteriously. Connect the dots.
It's almost like a real-life thriller playing out online. But of course, it's important to remember that correlation does not equal causation.
And this is where I think the role of the media adds another layer to this whole thing.
Right.
Sensationalized headlines, especially from outlets like TMZ, who even publish like graphic images from the scene of Payne's death.
Yeah.
Well, it just amps up the emotional intensity surrounding everything.
It's like throwing gasoline on an already raging fire. And when you combine that with the fact that Liam Payne was very open about his past struggles with addiction and mental health.
Right.
Remember those incredibly candid interviews he did on the Diary of a CEO podcast about relying on pills and booze during his One Direction days? It creates this perfect storm where speculation can run wild.
Absolutely. It's like everyone's trying to piece together a puzzle, but with only like half the pieces.
Right.
And speaking of missing pieces, there's another theory swirling around out there, and it revolves around the state of Payne's hotel room.
Right. Some fans are finding it suspicious that his room was described as being in disarray.
Yeah.
They're questioning if there was someone else there or if something more nefarious might be happening behind the scenes.
It's like that classic mystery trope, the messy room, that screams, there's more to this story. What do you make of that theory?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? This kind of speculation isn't uncommon after sudden celebrity deaths,
Yeah.
especially when there are unanswered questions.
Yeah.
It's human nature to try to fill in the blanks to find an explanation that makes sense of something so unexpected and tragic.
Yeah, that makes sense. And tragically, this wasn't the only difficult thing Liam was dealing with. Just days before his death, there was a lot of public scrutiny surrounding his relationship with his girlfriend, Katie Cassidy.
Right.
And his ex-fiancée, Maya Henry, even made some concerning allegations about his behavior on That the Internet is Dead podcast.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking all around.
Absolutely. And while these events are undoubtedly part of the larger tapestry of Liam's life, it's so important to be mindful and avoid drawing any direct lines between them and his death.
Right.
We have to be careful not to add to the speculation,
Yeah, you're right. It's a delicate balance. But it does make you think, doesn't it? about the pressures of fame, especially at such a young age. Liam was just a teenager when One Direction hit superstardom. Can you even imagine dealing with that level of scrutiny and attention so young?
It's almost unimaginable. And that brings us to a really important point, the concept of disenfranchised grief.
Okay.
This is something that often comes up in situations like this where fans are mourning the loss of a celebrity they felt connected to, even if they never met them personally.
That's a really interesting point. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah.
What is disenfranchised grief and why is it particularly relevant in this case?
Essentially, disenfranchised grief is a type of grief that isn't always openly acknowledged or socially supported. It's the grief we feel for losses that aren't always seen as legitimate or significant by others.
Okay.
In the case of a celebrity, deaf fans might experience this profound sense of loss, but they might also feel like they don't have the right to grieve as openly or intensely as someone who personally knew the deceased.
Wow, that really puts things into perspective. It's like this unspoken grief that so many people are experiencing, but might not feel comfortable expressing openly.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to talk about it, to acknowledge that it's okay to feel sadness and loss, even for someone you've never met personally.
Yeah.
The connections we form through music, through art, through shared experiences, those are real and valid, and so is the grief we feel when those connections are broken.
It's true, and I think that's something that we often forget in like the midst of all this, online speculation and theories, that there are real people behind all of this,
Absolutely.
who are hurting and grieving, and they deserve our respect.
100%. And, it makes you think about Liam's legacy, about how we remember him beyond the headlines and the controversies. He achieved so much at such a young age, and his music touched millions of lives all around the world.
It's incredible when you think about it. One Direction was a global phenomenon.
Right.
And Liam was such a huge part of that.
Totally.
Their music brought joy to so many people. And that's something worth celebrating, even as we grapple with the sadness of his passing.
It is. And it speaks to the enduring power of music, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How it can create these bonds that transcend borders and languages.
Right.
Liam's voice was a part of so many people's lives, and that's a legacy that will continue long after the conspiracy theories have faded.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the most powerful stories are the simplest ones.
Yeah.
The stories of, talent and of passion and of connecting with people through music. And in the end, maybe those are the stories we should be focusing on, the ones that remind us of Liam's humanity and the joy that he brought to so many.
Beautifully said. And as we wrap up, I keep coming back to this one thought.
Yeah.
In a world that often feels obsessed with tearing people down,
Right.
with the focusing on the negative, maybe the most radical thing we can do is choose to focus on the good,
Right.
to celebrate the talent and the light that Liam brought into the world.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect note to end on. So to everyone listening, as we continue to process this loss, let's try to remember Liam for the music he made, the joy he brought, and the lives he touched. And maybe, just maybe in doing so, we can find a little bit of light in the midst of all this darkness.